She stood on my porch at 11 at night in her pajamas and rain boots, holding a folder against her chest like it might try to escape. "You're the one I wanted to hear it from me," she said. And before she even opened that folder, I already knew whatever was inside it was about to change both our lives. My name is Owen Bennett. I'm 33, I teach high school biology, and up until that night, my biggest concern was whether my neighbor's cat would ever stop treating my porch furniture as a personal buffet. Her name was Maya Ferris, and she'd moved in next door about a year and a half earlier, right after a divorce that she never talked about in detail, and I never pushed her to explain. We lived in a quiet cul-de-sac outside Denver, the kind of street where everyone knew everyone's car by sound before they knew their name. Maya taught pottery classes at a community studio downtown, and the first time I met her, she was hauling a 50-pound bag of clay out of her trunk by herself, refusing help from 3 different neighbors before she finally let me carry it because, in her words, I looked like I needed a purpose more than she needed the assistance. That was Maya. Sharp, funny, allergic to being seen as fragile. Over that year and a half, we'd become the kind of neighbors who ended up being something closer to friends without either of us officially deciding it. Coffee on my porch some Saturday mornings. Borrowed sugar that never got returned on principle. A running argument about whether her cat, Biscuit, was a menace or a genius, which honestly could have gone either way. I liked her. I'd known that for longer than I wanted to admit, in the quiet way you know something you've decided not to examine too closely, because examining it might mean risking the easy thing you already have. She was still healing from a marriage that had ended badly, and the last thing I wanted was to become one more complication in a life that was just starting to feel steady again. So I kept it simple, neighborly, careful. That Tuesday started like any other. I graded papers, walked my dog, waved at Maya when she got home from the studio looking tired in the specific way she'd been looking tired for a few weeks. I noticed it. I hadn't asked about it, because Maya had a habit of deflecting personal questions with a joke sharp enough to end the conversation before it started. Around 11 that night, I was still awake, half watching something forgettable on television, when I heard a knock at my door. Not aggressive, careful, almost hesitant, which was unusual enough on its own that I was already uneasy before I opened it. Maya stood there in flannel pajama pants and unlaced rain boots, a light jacket thrown over her shoulders like she'd left the house without fully deciding to. Her hair was down, which almost never happened, and she was holding a manila folder pressed flat against her chest with both arms. "Maya," I said, "it's 11 o'clock. I know what time it is." Her voice was steady, but there was something underneath it I hadn't heard from her before. Not fear exactly. More like the careful calm of someone who had rehearsed a sentence so many times it had started to sound rehearsed even to her. "Are you okay?" She let out a short breath that wasn't quite a laugh. "That's a complicated question tonight." I stepped back from the door. "Come in." She did, but she didn't sit down right away. She stood in my living room, folders still held against her chest, looking at the floor like it might offer better instructions than I could. "I got some test results back today," she said finally. My stomach dropped in a way I wasn't prepared for. "What kind of test results?" "I found a lump about 6 weeks ago." She said it fast, like ripping off a bandage was easier than peeling it slowly. I didn't tell anyone. I told myself it was probably nothing, because that's what you tell yourself so you can keep going to work and feeding your cat and pretending your life isn't about to change. She finally looked up at me. "It's not nothing." The room went very quiet. I could hear my own dog shift on his bed in the corner, the refrigerator humming in the kitchen, the rain starting lightly against the window. "Maya," I said carefully. "What did they say?" "Breast cancer. Stage 2. She said it the way you'd read a weather report, flat and factual, because I think flat and factual was the only way she could get the sentence out at all. "They caught it early enough that the odds are good." That's what everyone keeps telling me. The odds are good. I didn't know what to say, so for a second I didn't say anything. I just crossed the room and stood in front of her, close enough that she didn't have to project her voice to be heard. "Why didn't you tell me you found something 6 weeks ago?" I asked, not with any edge to it, just genuinely wanting to understand. Because 6 weeks ago it was still maybe nothing, and I didn't want anyone treating me differently over a maybe. She finally lowered the folder a little, holding it now instead of hugging it. I've spent the last 3 hours trying to figure out how to tell people. My sister, my mom, my ex, who's going to find out through my mom anyway and make it about himself somehow. And instead you came here. Instead I came here. Her eyes met mine, and there was something raw in them I hadn't seen from Maya before, not even in the worst weeks after her divorce. You're the one I wanted to hear it from me, not from a group text, not secondhand through the neighborhood grapevine. From me, standing in your living room in rain boots at 11 at night like a disaster. My chest tightened in a way that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with what that sentence actually meant. Maya, why me? She looked down at the folder again, like the answer might be easier to give to it than to me directly. Because you're the person I actually wanted standing next to me when I said it out loud for the first time. Not because you're convenient. Not because you're next door. Her voice wavered, just slightly, the first crack in all that careful steadiness. Because somewhere in the last year and a half, you became the person I check whether I'm okay against. And I needed to know if I said this, and it was real, that you'd still be standing here after. I didn't answer with words right away. I just reached out and took the folder from her hands, gently, and set it on the side table, because I didn't need to see the paperwork to know what mattered. Then I pulled her into a hug, and she let out a breath against my shoulder that sounded like something she'd been holding since the moment she got that phone call. I'm still standing here, I said quietly. I'm not going anywhere. She pulled back just enough to look at me, eyes wet, but her jaw set in that stubborn way I recognized. I don't want this to become the only thing anyone sees when they look at me. I don't want to be the sick neighbor. I don't want pity casseroles and careful voices and people flinching every time I say the word cancer. Then I won't do that, I said. I'll do the other thing. I'll show up, and I'll bring actual food, not casseroles, and I'll still argue with you about whether Biscuit is a menace or a genius, because that argument matters to me exactly as much as it did yesterday. That got a real laugh out of her, small and surprised, the kind that breaks through when someone gives you permission to still be yourself in the middle of something enormous. He's a genius, she said. You're just biased against cats who judge you. He judges everyone. It's not personal. It's a little personal. She wiped under one eye with the back of her hand, composure slipping back into place, though not all the way. I have surgery in 3 weeks. Then probably chemo. I don't actually know how any of this is going to go. Okay, I said. Then we figure it out 3 weeks at a time. She studied me for a long moment, like she was checking whether I meant that the way it sounded, or whether I was just saying the thing people say. You don't have to do this, Owen. We're neighbors who share sugar and argue about my cat. You don't owe me showing up for something this big. I know I don't owe it to you, I said. I want to. That's different. Something shifted in her face then, something that had been braced this whole conversation finally letting go a little. Why? She asked, quieter now. Really? Why do you want to? I could have given her the easy answer, the neighborly answer. Instead, I told her the truth, because if there was ever a night that deserved the truth instead of something safer, it was that one. Because I've liked you for longer than I've let myself admit, I said. Because I've spent 1.5 years telling myself it wasn't the right time, or you weren't in the right place, or I didn't want to complicate something good by making it something more. And tonight you stood on my porch and told me the scariest thing you've probably ever had to say out loud. And the only thing I felt underneath being scared for you was how much I didn't want to imagine any version of this where I'm not the person standing next to you. Maya didn't say anything for a second. Then her mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile yet, but was heading there. That is a lot to admit on the same night as a cancer diagnosis. I'm aware of the timing, I said. It's not great. It's terrible, she agreed. I'm going to remember it anyway. Good, I said, because I meant it. She stepped closer, close enough that the space between careful and honest finally collapsed. I think I've liked you for about as long, she admitted. I just didn't want to be one more complicated thing in your life. And then I definitely didn't want to be the complicated thing with an oncologist attached. You're not a complication, I said. You're the thing that makes the rest of it worth showing up for. She let out a breath that was somewhere between a laugh and something more fragile, and then she kissed me, soft and a little uncertain at first, like she was testing whether the moment could hold the weight of everything we'd just said. It held. When we pulled apart, she rested her forehead against mine for a second. Well, she said, that's not how I pictured tonight going when I put these boots on. Bold choice, honestly. Rain boots for a life-changing confession. They were the first thing by the door. She laughed, and it sounded lighter than anything else she'd said all night. I was mostly trying not to think too hard about what I was doing, or I never would have knocked. I'm glad you knocked. 3 weeks later, I sat in the surgical waiting room with her sister, her mother, and Biscuit's carrier, because Maya had insisted the cat needed to be close by even if he couldn't technically attend. The surgery went well. The months of treatment after it were hard in ways neither of us fully understood until we were inside them, but I kept the promise I made that night on my porch. I showed up. I brought actual food. I still argued about the cat. A year later, on the anniversary of the day she rang my doorbell in rain boots, Maya was declared in remission. We celebrated with the same cheap wine we'd been drinking on my porch since the beginning of all of it, and at some point that evening, she looked at me and said, "You know, you never actually got a say in this. I just decided you were the person I wanted standing next to me, and you showed up. Best decision anyone's ever made on my behalf," I told her. 2 years after that porch light night, I proposed in the same spot where she'd first knocked, rain boots included, because she insisted on the full recreation. She said yes before I finished the sentence, then made me start over so she could say it properly the second time. Now, when people ask how we got together, Maya tells them, he was the first person I told. I tell them, she was the only person I wanted to hear it from. So tell me, if someone you cared about showed up at your door at 11 at night to tell you something that scared them more than anything else in their life, what would you have said? And have you ever had someone choose you to be the one who heard it first, before anyone else? Tell me your story in the comments. If you like this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.